Okay, I think we're gonna get started. Thank you all for coming. I hope you guys had a good time yesterday and you're feeling well. Um, I'm trying to feel on my best. Yeah, so today I'm gonna talk about logic apps and how you can make your life easier and save some money on top of that, right? Um, I'm Thiago Passos. I'm a solution architect at SSW. These some of the social channels that you can find me on. I'm Brazilian, father of three, actually just turned three. So I've got a 2 months old at home. And I took the time to come here. So yeah. I just finished leading a project with 9 developers for a big company. And it was quite interesting as well. We just shipped to production. But I wasn't there because I was looking after my family. So I took 3 months off. So I'm 2 months in my off time. And my current job is playing Lego with my kids and building tree houses with safe equipment. All right, so let's see how I split the talk today, right? So I'm gonna talk about what is Logic App. I'm gonna talk about the concept of building blocks. If you don't have the building blocks, the building block you're looking for, then you can create your custom connectors, and I'm gonna show you how. I'm gonna talk about the Logic App in the context of a developer, and I'm gonna share some real world examples. So let's start with what is Logic App. Logic App is a workflow engine, right? It's very visual. You don't even need to be a developer to create a Logic App. It's pretty much like almost like drag and drop. Of course, being a developer, bringing this skill is gonna help a lot, but you don't need to be a developer. But you can look at Logic App as also an integration tool because there are so many connectors, so many building blocks that you can put together that you can call it an integration tool, right? And more than that, you can call an automation tool as well, because with the triggers, you can start the Logic Apps with pretty much anything. So you can start with a HP endpoint, or you can start with a timer of some sort, or a queue, or some event that happens in a third-party application like Twitter, like Facebook, or LinkedIn, or pretty much anything. You can also call a process documentation tool. So I presented this talk in Brisbane, and a guy came to me and said, "This is awesome because I can actually use that to show the people involved how the process works," right? So it's pretty much like a smart process documentation tool. It's serverless, so you don't need to handle any server. So it's all in the cloud, which is awesome, and you only pay for what you use, which is great. I love that. But someone came to me and said, "Yeah, that's great, but that's gonna motivate people to take shortcuts. So they're not gonna do any error handling because for each step that they do, they're gonna pay more." And it's kind of true. You pay for the step, but if you think about good practices and all that, you end up paying more for the good practices. So you shouldn't take shortcuts anyway. But let's move on. So the building blocks. I grew up with playing with Lego. So who here plays with or played with Lego? All right, so that's pretty much 100% of the room. So who here still plays with Lego? There you go. It's a good number. So I grew up playing with Lego, and I'm actually looking forward for my kids to be old enough so I can play Mindstorm. So have you guys played with Mindstorm? It's the Lego compute that you plug with connectors and whatever. Like, I'm looking forward for them to be old enough so I can play with that. But anyway, the context with the building blocks here is I grew up with Lego, and we had all these standard blocks, right? And you had to be very, very creative to build something nice because they were so standard that you didn't have too many paths to move around, right? Nowadays, the Lego is so amazing. You have so many different parts and blocks that you can build pretty much anything. And that's pretty much like the word in Logic Apps. We don't have that many connectors, that many building blocks. Just a couple, and you gotta be quite creative to build something nice. And this is called connectors. So these building blocks in Logic Apps, they are called connectors. And the connectors, they will provide a bunch of stuff, right? So each connector is an integration point to an external party or some internal service, right? So it can provide a bunch of triggers and actions, and that's what I'm going to cover next. So in Logic Apps, we have three main areas. So we have the triggers, which is something that it's going to start the workflow, right? And in this trigger, we have three categories. The first one is the polling, and that's the most used one. So if you think about Twitter feed or RSS feed or a lot of other third-party integrations, you set up the polling, and the Logic Apps will keep polling in the time frame that you set up. And as soon as there is something new, the workflow is going to be kicked off, right? So that's how the polling works. And on the other side, we have the push, where it's the other way around. So the integration point is going to start the workflow, right? So that can be a HP endpoint, or that can be a queue, or service bus, or anything like that. And we have the recurrence, which is a schedule, basically a basic schedule where you're going to use cron expression to set up the schedule. Then we have the actions. So the actions is pretty much everything that happens after the workflow starts, right? So we have a bunch of built-in actions provided by Azure. So like the cognitive services, a bunch of data manipulation actions. And that's something that you're going to use all the time. So you bring some data in, you're going to do some manipulation with data, and then you're going to move on. Then you have all the actions provided by the connectors. For example, if you want to create a ticket in Zendesk, if you want to send an email with Gmail, or if you want to create an item in SharePoint, if you wish. I know this guy here is a SharePoint fan, but anyway. And you can also create your own. So you can create your custom actions, right? Then you have the control workflow. So this is the glue that's going to put your workflow together, right? So this is like programming without coding, right? So these are like the conditions, the loops, switch, scope, and terminate. So that's how you make the workflow happen. All right, so that all sounds good. But what if you need a custom connector? Or what if you need a custom action, right? So back in the day, we didn't have 3D printers. But today, if you need a new Lego block, you can just get the schema and then print, right? And that's what you can do with Logic Apps. You can create your custom action, your custom connector. But before I get to the point of creating one, let me tell you one thing. Logic Apps love Azure Functions. So who here is playing with Azure Functions? Right, so who here is using in production? Good, one person. Oh. Yeah, so if you have something that you want to achieve where it's not available, which is going to happen. So if you need to do some data manipulation that's very complex, and it's going to take too much overhead to create with the out-of-the-box actions, you can create your Azure Functions to make stuff happen and then get the result back. The other thing that Logic Apps love as well is OpenAPI. So who here is using OpenAPI? Right, not that many. Who here is using Swagger? All right, so more hands. Yeah, so Swagger and OpenAPI is the same thing. So the Swagger, if you're not using, have a look, get started, because that's what's everyone's gonna use from now on. So it's a specification for your API, and actually tells everything about your API, including authentication, including all the contracts or models or DTOs as you wish to call, right? And as a developer, if you have that set up in your application, you are one step ahead on creating your custom connector. So let's see how we can create one. So you can go to the portal, you can click on that plus button there, and you can look for Logic App connector. and then you can select the connector and then create your own. So you give it a name and create, and then you're going to land on this quite useless page, right? But then you have that edit button that you can actually create your connector, right? So you're going to get there to create your actions and triggers and so on. So you're going to land on this wizard sort of screen, right? And as I was saying, I'm not sure if that's going to work. Oh, that's going to work. All right. So if you have the Swagger specification, you can just paste the URL for your Swagger specification, or you can upload the JSON file, which is pretty good. And from there, it's going to get all the endpoints and create actions for your endpoints automatically. You can also use SOAP. I don't know who is using SOAP nowadays, but you can. And you can use Postman collections as well. I know at least one person who is going to be happy with that. JK. Anyway. All right, so you can, I'm using the pet store from Swagger.io as an example here. So you can paste the URL and then you can move on to the security. And then you have some security options, right? So you have basic authentication, API, and OAuth. Again, if you're using Swagger, this is going to come automatically from Swagger, from the specification, right? In this case, I'm just going to move on with no authentication just to prove a point. And I'm going to go to the definition. And what we're going to see here on the left-hand side is all the endpoints that are available in my Swagger specification automatically populated here in my actions, right? I can still go through and edit them to make it look nicer, or change the names, or add more stuff in the contract, or change the names in the contract to make more sense. But for now, I'm going to keep this way. I'm just going to update, right? So now I have my connector, and let's see how I can use. So I'm gonna create a very dumb logic app as an example, just so you can see how the connector is used, right? So you can go to the portal, click on the plus button, look for logic app, create the logic app, give it a name, and then we're gonna create. Then you're gonna land on this page here, where you're gonna set what's gonna trigger that logic app. As I said, it's gonna be a dumb example, so I'm just gonna use the schedule. So in a schedule, I'm gonna run that. I'm gonna run every 3 minutes. I'm gonna create a new step, and I'm gonna select custom. So this is gonna search for any custom connectors in my subscription in Azure, right? So I'm gonna select custom, and you have all those actions available for you, right? So that's what we just created in the custom connectors. I'm gonna select one just as an example. I'm gonna just put a static ID here, and the next step, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you how that data comes back in, all right? So I'm gonna create a new step, and I'm gonna send an email to myself. As I said, it doesn't do anything, but what I wanna show you here is all the data that's provided by the action, right? So that's coming automatically from your Swagger specification. So that's the contract, that's the DTO coming from your Swagger specification. Okay, and then you save and off you go. So the logic app is done. So that sounds good, but what if your data is on premises? Then you're in trouble, right? Because everything is available in the internet. So if your data is on premises, what are you going to do? So you're going to face this guy here. That's the IT guy. And he's not going to be happy. He's not going to open any ports for you to talk to your on-premises data, right? But there is a solution for that. So you can install this on-premises data gateway, which is going to create a tunnel between your network, your VM inside your network to Azure, right? So after you create that, you can talk from Azure to your on-premises data. So you can do pretty much anything that you couldn't do before. And to install that is just like a small wizard. You put email, create a new one, give it a name and password, and there you go. Your gateway, your data gateway is done, is available. You've got the name there, and something to note here is the region, because when you create in the portal, you have to select the region so it comes automatically. All right, so I've got the data gateway set up in my VM. Now I'm going to go to the portal, and I'm going to create that on-premises data gateway. So I'm going to create a new resource, do on-premises, and select the on-premises data gateway. I'm going to give it a name, and as I said, you have to select the region so the on-premises data gateway comes automatically. All right. So that's the name that I gave before, and that's it. So now you have a connection between Azure and your on-premises data, where you couldn't have before because it's all locked down. Okay. So as an example, again, I'm going to create another dumb example, but just so you can see how you can use the on-premises data gateway. And for that, I'm going to use the file system. So that's something that you couldn't dream of doing before, right? Unless you expose an API that exposes the file system of your VM or whatever. But I'm going to check the file system. I'm going to give a name to that connection. I'm going to listen for changes in this folder. I'm going to set up the authentication, and I'm going to get the gateway that I just set up. All right? So that's how I'm going to connect my Logic app to my network, to my internal network. I'm going to create that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to send an email to myself whenever someone changes a file or adds a file into the folder, and I'm going to send an email to myself with the path. Something basic, but just so you can see that the power that you can do with that. You can also use for SharePoint on-premises, CRM on-premises, any on-premises systems that you wouldn't be able to do before. Right, so I'm going to create that. I'm going to go now to my folder in my VM. I'm going to add a file there, and then I'm going to go to my mailbox and check if that came through. Okay, so all working. And now I broke that, I added that bridge between the portal, the internet, and my on-premises data. All right. But hey, I'm a developer. You saw that bringing your development skills is going to add a lot of value to your Logic apps with Swagger, with Azure Functions. But I don't want to use the portal for that, right? I want to use Visual Studio as any .NET developer would use. Then you can install these Azure Logic Apps tools for Visual Studio 2017. So you can play with Azure Functions within the context of your Visual Studio. Be aware it's going to look the same. Yeah, anyway. So you can go to Visual Studio, go to View, Cloud Explorer, and then you have all the resources coming into Visual Studio, so you can play with that in here, right? So I find my Logic apps on the left-hand side. I go to my Logic app, and then I can either open in the portal, which defeat the purpose, or I could just open here in Visual Studio. So I'm going to open here, and you see it looks exactly the same. Well, so it's an option. What you can do from here as well, you can check the code view of that Logic app, which is a JSON specification of the whole workflow, right? So you can make changes as you wish, and from here you can either run the trigger, you can upload to publish the changes you made, or you can download, which again I think it's useless because it's just a JSON file, so you can copy and paste, right? But yeah, there you go. You have an option. But let's talk about some real world examples, right? So that all sounds good, but how can I use that? How can I do something interesting? How can I save money and save time? So there was a company that came to us, and they're a big company, and they have a blog where many people in the company will post to that blog, right? So that's the first example. And every time someone posted a blog post, they had to promote. So they had someone who would be monitoring any new blog posts, and as soon as a new blog post would come in, they would promote on Twitter, promote on LinkedIn, and that's something that would take time, right? And this person had to have the credential for LinkedIn, for Bitly, for whatever social media that they needed in order to do that, right? So if that person was sick, then they would be in trouble. They wouldn't be able to do it. Or they would need to nominate someone else, which would take even more time, all right? But let's see how it works. So when a new post is published, they needed to create a link on Bitly. So who is using Bitly? All right, so not many. Bitly is pretty good to shorten a link. And if you have an account, you can actually say you can update the URL that you want, and you can monitor the usage of that link when you share, which is pretty good. But anyway, so they create a short link in Bitly and then they post it on Twitter, right? So they create another short link on Bitly, a different one, to post on LinkedIn. And the reason they had two is to be able to monitor separately on LinkedIn and Twitter. And then they could see the dashboard coming on Bitly and they were happy, right? So how long do you think the person would take to do that manually for like 10 posts a week? It's a long time, isn't it? If the person is very fast, I reckon she would take half an hour to do it, if she's fast, right? But I would say it's more. So if you put a logic app together, it's gonna take like 5 minutes to build, and you're saving that time, which is money, right? So let's see how we can put it together. Don't worry about the size of the screen there, it's not that important, but just so you can have an idea on how easy it is to build, how easy it is to put together. So you have an RSS feed trigger, so when a new post comes in, we're gonna create a Bitly short link, and then we're gonna post on Twitter. We're gonna create another Bitly short link and post on LinkedIn. So that's how easy it is. Like, it took 5 minutes to do it, and it's saving at least half an hour every week, right? And then you can go to the Bitly dashboard and you can see stuff coming up. Cool, happy days. All right, so that's a simple example, and it's saving a bit of time. But let's talk about something more critical, the GDPR. So who here is familiar with GDPR? All right. So for those who are not familiar with GDPR, if you're dealing with EU citizen, you should, because you can get a pretty fat fine. I think it's 20 million or 4% of the global revenue. It's big, and you should be aware of that. And 20 million euros, not dollars, just FYI. But anyway, so I'm not going to talk about GDPR that much here, but one of the rules is the user, the person, needs to be able to delete all the data from the company, right? So if the person calls you and he's a EU citizen, you have to delete all your data from the company, their data from your systems. And if you think about a big company, you might have several systems, external systems and internal systems, and you have to delete the data, right? And this on its own, it's already a big chunk of work, and you have to do it anyway, otherwise you're gonna pay a big fine. But think about orchestrating all these tasks to delete data from here, from there, from all these custom databases and things like that. It's a time-consuming task. But let's see how the process is gonna take place. So we have a new data removal coming in. That can be a call, that can be an email, that can be on Twitter or whatever. And we're gonna add this email in a queue. So the username or whatever in a queue. And then we're gonna wipe data from SharePoint. Well, I don't know how SharePoint works, if you guys know. And then you're gonna wipe data from Salesforce. And you're gonna wipe data from several custom databases. And then you're gonna notify the user, right? So that's a long process. And if you think about that companies, they are very restrict about who has access to what, it's gonna take a long time. So imagine someone coming to the IT guy and say, can you delete this data from the production database? He's never gonna do that. He's never gonna give you access to do that, right? So that's something that you have to think. And if you have a process like that, you have to put together this very well documented process. Because if there is a new system being built, you can just update the logic app and off you go, right? So how long do you think that person, not considering all the custom work that you have to do to delete data from SharePoint, delete data from Salesforce, but how long do you think it's going to take just for the process to take place for one request? It's a long time, hey? So you get that user, so you have to talk to someone, can you delete from here? Can you delete from here? Can you delete from here? And that if that person who does that is not available or is sick, then you lose that. And then the person is going to forget to come back to say, hey, delete that. Or the person is on holiday, then you're even more in trouble. So I would say at least a day we are saving here. And that's being generous, right? So that person can take a long time to process one request. And if they forget something, you can get a fine. So you have to document that quite thoroughly. But let's get back to the block, to the building block concept. And we're going to use some of them to make this happen, right? So we're going to use the service bus. And the service bus is going to be responsible for kicking off the workflow. If something fails, the service bus will be able to retry and retry and retry until it goes on, or until you say it's enough, right? Then you're going to go to SharePoint. You're going to delete from SharePoint, from Salesforce, from a bunch of custom databases. And then you're going to notify the user using MailChimp, just because you have a nice template there. So with that, you're done. Okay, so if you have a new custom database, a new system being built, you introduce that in the first day, and then off you go. You don't need to worry about that anymore. When a new request comes in, it's just going to be dealt with. Okay. And the last example I'm going to talk about is the gamification of social media events. And that's the thing that I put together just for this event. Right? So that's something that I built so I could show here and see how powerful this kind of stuff is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen for Twitter handles. Okay. If you still want to be part of it, I don't know if you guys tweeted on using this hashtag NDC Sydney and NDC Conferences. But if you want, you still have time. But anyway, so I'm going to listen for Twitter handles. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to detect the sentiment on that tweet. And I'm going to use the cognitive services to detect the sentiment on the text, right? And that's going to give me back a score from 0 to 1, where 0.3 is a negative, 0.3 to 0.7 is neutral, and 0.7 to 1 is positive, right? So I'm going to ditch all the neutral because I just care about the happy tweets, right? And I'm going to check for media. So if the person takes a snapshot, or if the person takes a selfie, or drinking with people, whatever, I'm going to check for media. And with that, I'm going to detect the faces, and I'm going to detect the level of happiness of the faces using cognitive services as well. And that's all out of the box in Azure, just FYI. And with that, I'm going to create a dashboard showing all the happy faces, the most mentioned, which might be useful for the event organizer, because if you see who is the person who is most mentioned, it might be worth it to bring that person back in the next conference, right? Or what topics are the most mentioned, the hashtags and things like that. It might tell to the organizer that we have to bring more talks around that area. Anyway, so how long do you think that's going to take to build without logic apps? So it's a long time, hey? It should be a long time just to handle Twitter, to handle all the. I'm not talking about the cognitive services here because we wouldn't build that. But yeah, it's a long time just to put this together, right? I would say I would save at least a week of work, right? So by using logic apps, because the logic apps itself that I'm going to show you, I'm going to show the whole solution, took me an hour or so to build. So it was pretty quick to build, and I had all that, apart from the dashboard, because the dashboard was custom made. But anyway, I'm going to show you these now. I'm going to show you the thing working. So I'm going to go here. All right, I'm going to close these. Well, where's my mouse? There you go. All right, so this is the logic app. Okay. No, it's not the logic app. All right, I'm just going to finish here. Okay. All right, all good. I'm just going to increase the font a little bit. Can you guys see that? Cool. All right, so this is the logic app, right? So I'm going to check here when a new tweet is posted. So I'm going to listen for a bunch of hashtags and Twitter handles. And I'm going to check that every 30 seconds. So that's the polling that I was talking about. Okay. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to do a condition here. If it's not an original tweet, I'm just going to terminate the logic app because I don't care about retweets and responses or anything like that. I just care about original tweets, right? Otherwise, it's going to get all my credits, and I don't like that. Anyway, so I'm going to get that tweet into a document so I can start playing with that document. So that's this one here. I'm going to detect the sentiment, which is as easy as creating a step here. So I'm going to send the tweet text, and that's going to give me back the score of that text. So I'm going to store that in the document that I created. I'm going to create a new variable so I can go through the images. So I'm going to go through all the media URLs that the Twitter feed gives me. And I'm going to detect faces and analyze the image, right? So the faces are going to tell, it's just going to return like a bunch of squares with the level of happiness or level of anger or frustration or anything like that. And the analyze image, it's going to give me a caption and a bunch of tags for that image. So if I take a photo here, it's going to say a bunch of people sitting in a room. So that's the sort of caption that you're gonna get. All right, so I'm gonna append that image into array, and then I'm gonna put that array back into the document. I'm gonna save the document into Cosmos DB, and I'm gonna run an Azure function that's gonna compile all the tweets for this conference. Okay, so as soon as a new tweet comes in, I'm gonna compile everything so I can show that in the dashboard. Okay. And also I'm gonna automatically reply to people saying, hey, you are featured in the dashboard. I don't know if you guys got any response from that. Have you guys got any response on Twitter saying something weird? No? Good. Anyway, so that's the logic app, and that's how simple it is to build. But let's see how we can monitor that, right? So let's see how that works. So I have one here open. And this is an example of an image that was posted. So we can see exactly what happened, and you can see all the ticks, the green ticks on the right-hand side, that everything worked well. And this one means that it didn't run because that was the terminate. And since this one is an original tweet, I care about it, right? So let's see what we had in this tweet. So it's someone from Emily Martin from Redify posted a tweet. Cool. So let's check the sentiment. So she had 97% of happiness. So it was pretty good. She was pretty happy with this photo. And then there was an image. So let's see the faces. So we have this image here. So let's see the image. All right. So that was the image. All right. So a bunch of people. And I'm sure it detected a bunch of faces. So let's see how it worked. All right, so you can see the output here, and you can see a bunch of faces. So if we click on the show raw output, we can actually see the whole response from the cognitive services. If that doesn't open up, all right, so that opened. Okay, so that's what you get from the cognitive services. So you have the header, and in the body, you have a list of faces that it came back from that image. So you can actually see a bunch of stuff, a bunch of nice stats from that. Right? So you can see all where the eye is and things like that. But you can also see some face attributes. So you can see if it's smiling and emotion on that face, right? So you can see that we have a bunch of happy faces. Apart from, I think that the last one wasn't happy. So let's see. Yeah, so this person here wasn't happy. So it's half happy. Anyway, so they got in the first place in the dashboard, and I'm going to show you the dashboard soon. So that was the first, the top one with happy faces in the dashboard. And then we are from SSW, and we kind of rival from Redify. It's in a healthy way, of course. And we said, we have to take another picture, right? So we have to take a picture with more happy faces. And then we posted this, right? So we went here and we posted part of the SSW crew, 82% of happiness, wasn't too happy. And we have this image here, right? We actually did some calculation. Oh my God. I'll get there. That's hard. Just gonna. Yeah, so we checked the image and the responses, and we saw that we needed 15 happy faces to be on top, right? So we needed 15 happy faces. And we had 17 people, right? And we said, all right, so if everyone smiles, we're going to be on top. That's easy. But then we had Costa here that wasn't smiling. We had Michael that wasn't smiling. And we had Florent here who was behind someone, so we didn't get the first place. We got the second one, right?
We can beat them now.
We can beat them now. All right, but yeah, like that's all right. Then we said, all right, so if you can't beat them, you join them, right? So we took a photo with them, and that's all fine. And at the end of the day, that's the sort of stuff that you get. So that's the dashboard. And after I compile that using Azure Functions, I'm compiling all the tweets and getting the top 5 happy tweets, the top 5 happy faces, the total tweets, which is pretty amazing. We had 1,800 tweets so far, and it's growing. It's pretty good for a 3-day conference. And we had 900 different people tweeting. So it's pretty amazing. And the average happiness is 75%. It's pretty good. So what sort of stuff we have here? So we have the top mentions. So SSR TV is on top. Hey. Redify is third. And I was surprised that one person was actually on top there. Patricia Az or Patricia Gallardo. She did an awesome presentation, and I actually came to her and said, "Oh, look, you're on top shoe there. It's amazing." She was pretty good. And PubConf was on top for a long time, but for some reason it got down. But I assume a lot of people are going to PubConf. Who's going to PubConf? Not many people. You should go, guys. Come on, it's fun. You should go. Anyway, so that's the sort of stuff that you can get. Yeah, if you wanna check these, it's available there. It's happyconfs.app, and if you put /NDC Sydney, that's for this conference. I'm monitoring a few conferences, but just to test the data. Anyway, all right, I'm gonna get back here. All right, so it went a bit. All right, so I've got some resources. So if you want to try Logic Apps, you can try for free. So you don't even need to have an Azure subscription. You can just go there and play with that. If you have any ideas on custom connectors or actions or anything like that you want to introduce to Logic Apps, you can use the user voice for that, and the top features are going to be worked on earlier. You can check the blog and the Twitter handle, which they're always releasing stuff, so it's pretty cool. And that's all I have for you. Thank you very much. So I think we have time for questions. Yep.
How much credit are you using up in Azure?
How much credit I'm using in Azure? So that's a very good question. I actually blow up my credits. I have $200 of credits every month. And just before, a couple of days before the conference, I ran out of credits and all my servers were down. I was sad. But I called them and said, "Oh, come on, you have to do something." And they actually started the credits again. I was happy. That's good. After several calls. Anyway, it happened. Any more questions?
So is that credit being used all on the Logic apps, or is that spread across other resources that you're using in Azure?
Is the credits used only on Logic apps? I think I'm using, 150. I think in the last 3 or 4 days, I used about $50 on these. But that's because I'm using Cosmos DB, and I might change that to something else. And the text analytics, because I end up testing that all the time, because all the tweets will go through the text analytics, and the image, the face recognition and the image analytics only runs when there is an image. So yeah, but I think it's mainly the Cosmos DB and the text analytics. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see a breakdown of where those costs come in.
Yeah, we can check now actually. So if we go to the portal here, you're gonna see a few other stuff. But yeah, we can see that now. In the last couple of days, I think I think it was $50 across all the services. Hmm? Is it a Mac thing?
That's Pat, I'm pretty sure.
A Mac thing. Anyway, so that's what it is. So that's this two here. So it was not that much. It's like $27 in the last 3 or 4 days, and the rest is my own stuff. But yeah, these two here are the main ones I'm using for this application. Any more questions?
When you mentioned that you can create a gateway to your on-premises, like some kind of APIs or
The on-premises data gateway.
Yeah. How is it working? Like when you just create this gateway, like basically creating a kind of a hole in the firewall, or?
All right. So how does the on-premises data gateway work? So the on-premises data gateway, they work in a very different way. So the way it works, you install that in your VM.
So you actually, yeah. Right.
As long as this VM has access to internet, it's fine. Because what the gateway is gonna check if there is something new, right? So the Azure is not gonna break any firewall rules to get into that.
Okay.
It's gonna be the other way around.
So
The on-prem.
agents actually pushing that.
Yeah.
When someone requests
Yeah.
that, it's pushing. Okay.
That's right. So the on-premises data gateway is gonna check. Hey, do you need me? Hey, do you need me? Hey, do you need me?
Yeah.
As soon as it's needed, go through.
Cool.
Any more questions?
Is it the same gateway that's used for Power BI?
Is it the same gateway that's used for Power BI? I'm not sure if it's the same one, but it might be very similar, because this used for across multiple services in Azure, so it might be the same or similar. Cool. Anything else? No? Oh, good. Thank you very much.